Hi, everybody. Let's begin. So, Josh, you're going to get a seat or what? It's really good to be able to introduce your friends when you come to these lectures, because sometimes I get to introduce people I've never met before, which is a bit strange. So, C.J. Lim, who's speaking tonight, is Professor of Architecture and Urbanism at the Bartlett, founder of the practice Studio 8. And even though he sounds very Bartlett, which of course is that place up the road for any of you, he did actually study here for his whole education. So actually this is his spiritual home. He studied with the likes of Peter Cook and Peter Salter, and was even in a unit with a guy called Brett Steele, who I think you might have heard of. So he's quite well known to the AA. So I've known CJ for over 20 years, but I've always been slightly in awe of him, which is not that cool when it's your friend. You know, you don't really want to be in awe of your friends, but it just makes me feel inadequate. But I've watched his drawings and the production that he's done over the last 20 years, and it is quite amazing looking at his CV, which I just did again for this talk. So, you know, in 2004, he was the UK representative to the Venice Biennale for his project Virtual Venice. And in 2006, he won the Royal Academy's Grand Architecture Prize, which has been won by the likes of Richard Rogers, Norman Foster, and other people of that stature. So he's got a pretty impressive career. But whilst being so prolific with his own work, he's never waned in his dedication to teaching. And I think that's the thing that I'm most impressed by. It really does knock you when you think that over the last 23 or 4 years, his students have won the RIBA silver medal 7 times and the bronze medal twice, which is a pretty impressive accolade for a teacher. So in his spare time, traveling the world, building cities in China, which he now does, being visiting professor at numerous schools of architecture throughout the world, he still has time to write the odd book. And the book that he has on the screen here is his 11th book that he's written. And afterwards, he'll be doing a book signing in the South Jury Room. So if anybody wants to get their hands on it, he'll do that for you. So I have one regret about CJ, which we've talked about before, and I'm just going to mention again. So the year I started teaching at the Bartlett in 1995, CJ won an international competition to build the Cultural Centre for UCL on Gordon Street, so just up the road. And like a lot of projects that go through the competition process, it was canned. So I'm still waiting for one of CJ's buildings to be built in the UK. They seem to be turning up in China, but I really wish he'd build one here. So I'll stop talking and welcome Professor CJ Lim back to his home in the AA.
It's warm here, unlike the Bartlett. It's very, very cold in our new building, so that's why I was heavily coated up and scarfed up. Anyway, back to business. Could I have the lights off completely, please? Okay. Right. Stuart, I think I owe you more than beer for that. All the lies you said earlier on. And as a real long-time friend, you shouldn't say all these lies. Thank you. No, Stuart, you're very kind. I'm really, really delighted to be back here at the AA tonight. I'm really honored to be speaking to all of you. This is, in a way, my old home. I finished here long time ago, and I could still remember the days that we all sit in this room here, listening to interesting people speak throughout the whole year. So I feel really privileged tonight. Thank you. Today I'm going to speak about my new book, Food City. It's a companion to an older book called Smart City, which was to do with also food cultivation. Before I actually launch into the book itself, I really have to acknowledge the contribution of all these people. Without them, none of it would have happened. And, actually it includes Stuart's photos too. He has 2 pages in the book. As I said, this was the companion to Smart Cities. Smart Cities were commissions from the Chinese government. They were projects that we use urban agriculture to augment and choreograph the city. And that was the very beginning when our interest in the relation between food and architecture started, actually. Smart Cities was also a paradigm where we were investigating the symbiosis between nature and built form. This was the very, very first one we did in South China, in Shenzhen region. We later on invested the ideas of smart city into Western cities. This was in Copenhagen. Food City is an investigation into the urban consequences of food poetics and transparency. So for this book, unlike the last one, Smart City, this book combines nostalgia and futurism in a narrative architecture to examine food production in the urban environments. Smart Cities was predominantly very much real commissions from various governments, as I mentioned before, whereas this is much more polemic in its state. A picture here for the, do you want to sit in front? There's a whole row of seats here. Yeah. There's a lot of seats here. If you could come round. Yeah, please come and sit. There are loads of seats in front. As I said, a picture for the carnivores. I will have one for the vegetarians in a minute. Food City investigates the reinstatement of food at the core of national and local governance, how it could be a driver to restructure employment, education, transport, justice system, reevaluating how the city functions as a spatial and political entity. A picture for the vegetarians. These are big pieces of vegetable, I can assure you this. The book itself is divided into about 8 chapters, looking at food's relationship with business, with community, with culture, transport, and so forth. And the first of the many chapters, I want to quote this. Saskia Sassen wrote in The Global Street, "Urban spaces are emerging as sites of transformation out of the monopoly of the food industry. The city is a space where the powerless can make history." If you look very closely here at this image, this is in Accra, in a market, and you will see that most of everybody there would be women folks. And women play a very, very important role in the food industry, either as in the formal sense or in the informal food sector. Similarly, in Egypt and in India, in Salvador, in Cork, in Ireland. Here, this is the legacy of the butter industry. The building in front, the Rotund building, is the butter exchange. And when you visit this building, they are incredibly proud with one piece of information. They actually stated that this was the first place they provided women, folks in the region, with full and part-time employment, hence liberating them from household chores and also giving them financial independence. The picture on the right is another wonderful legacy. I absolutely love this image in the sense that it tells you, I would encourage you to go down to, when you go to Chathams, and sniff the building. You really, really have to put your nose right up to it. You can actually sniff the hundreds of years of history of food trade in London. You can smell the teas and the spices that have been embedded into the fabric of that part of London. The image on the left, actually, the image by Stuart Dott, is less positive. It shows the decline of a fast-shrinking city in Detroit, and that is showing the food center, a large food center in Detroit. The food business goes to great lengths to entice you to part with your money. This is what I call constructed realities. This is San Marco, Venetia, Las Vegas, not San Marco, Venice, Italy. This entire space is constructed like a prop, like a set, like a film set almost. And the ceiling is quite real. I mean, the sunset, the Italian sunset is pretty well painted on that sunset itself. Maybe my photo is not so good here, but when you're there, you actually get a sense, if you close one eye, you really could imagine yourself being in San Marco Square, having a plate pasta there. I'm a great fan of Ballard. Who reads Ballard here? Okay, I think more of you should read Ballard. He says in his book High Rise, as he sat on his balcony eating the dog, another carnivore, Dr. Lang reflected on the unusual events. With his 40 floors and thousands of apartments, his supermarkets, swimming pools, banks, junior schools, all in effect abandoned in the sky, the high-rise offered more than enough opportunity for violence. This image here is not so much about the kind of violence that we understand and know. But on the other hand, it's tension. If you look at the image in the middle where the train is, this train, it's the same space here. This is a market in Bangkok where it would part several times a day. It's almost like the Red Sea parting, yeah? When the train passes through it, it would part. The vendors will take away the stalls and they will part. And then when the train passes through it, the vendors will return. This is more what you call traditional violence here. This is in the West Bank. And the architecture there, as you can see, they're generally flat roofs. That is very much encouraged through the planning authority there to give communities that extra space. In a country where land is very, very vital and very little, and there's great density in the city, that flat roof will give them space for urban agriculture to supplement the food income and also food and nutrition. This is a different kind of tension within this community. This one is in Inuit, in Iceland. This is a city, a place, where they have about 10 months of snow that goes, you can see, it goes way beyond the height of a door, right? And the city council, they are really, really intelligent, bright people. They decided to spend a lot of money building an indoor skating ring, where they have lakes and you know, to skate on. So what they've done is that they actually, once it's built, the community took over this building and tore away all the things that was required for the skating ring and turned it into a very productive greenhouse for salad and fruit production. Communities, as I said, would go to great lengths to procure food for its inhabitants. This is what you see, the outcome of what they call this China-Zambian friendship farm, where China would invest money in African states. They would grow the grain there, and they would then be sent back to, in this case, in Beijing. All the grain there is all grown outside of China. Amongst other things, my greatest worry, I guess, would be the carbon footprint that is on every grain of wheat and rice and bean in those sacks. You couldn't choose the neighbors that you sit with tonight, could you? I mean, you couldn't choose the neighbors we live with. Here, you have neighbors hanging their chicken out on the wire in Shanghai to ensure that it's very crispy when it's actually baked in the oven. The other bird on the other side is not so crispy. It's actually, I like you guys. You have good sense of humor. This is the top dog in Sydney Fish Market. What happens here is that he has been there for many years. He would whoosh away all the other seagulls, trying to have some rich pickings of the catch of the day. Can I suggest that a few of you could sit there? Yeah, if you want to sit there, there are seats there, rather than just squatting or... Do you want to sit there? There's another seat. Please. Anybody, do you want to sit here? I think you should come and sit here. Yeah, please.
There's a few seats.
There's a few seats there. Please. Stuart, there's a seat here. Okay, Stuart lost the seat. Okay, this is getting better every minute. Tim Lang, a friend of mine and Professor David Porter, who's actually, I'm very honored that he's sitting in front of here, wrote this wonderful book called Food Wars. He said, the notion of a food culture is a more robust way of understanding people's beliefs and behaviors regarding food. The concept is central to food and health, and to which ideas about diet will dominate the consumer's mind. I think, just to provoke you tonight, I would suggest that we cannot ever buy meat from supermarkets. We should hunt for our meat. We have been eating meat quite indiscriminately because we can just go to Tesco's or Sainsbury's and buy it. And I actually think that because of that, we have all sorts of health problems that comes with it, and all sorts of problems with farming beef or chicken or pork. So this is an image which was actually taken not 100 years ago, only quite recently in Denmark, where you can actually see freshly hunted deer and also bits that comes up from it, the image on the right-hand side. I've always associated, Florence with something beyond what we all know Florence to be. This image here is the Duomo, and we all love the architecture, the museums, the fabric of the city, and say how beautiful it is. But for me, my relationship with Florence is slightly different. I always remember this, and it always sticks to my mind that there's a quote from a film and book. It says, my favorite lunch would be a plate of fava beans, a glass of Chianti, and a plate of human liver. Anybody know where it comes from? Great. And the image on the other side is probably as delicious as a plate of human liver. That's a vendor selling fairly good hamburger on the pavement outside the MoMA in New York. As you can see, he's doing quite a good trade usually. But the best hamburger in New York, I would say, that would be inside the building itself. It's the Sponge hamburger by Klaus Oldenburg. And if we are not careful about food security, this is what is going to happen. If you look at this image by the artist Tia Makipa, they become incredibly unhealthy. This shows a dystopic London, where you have to eat rodents. Anybody getting sick yet? Although food issues relating to food security, agricultural sustainability, diet-related diseases, and social exploitation are of vital importance to the future prosperity of our cities, they are underrepresented in the public realm. Because food industries spend millions and millions telling you how good their products are, that you should buy them indiscriminately. And even architects and designers do not tell us much. They just actually project the sort of architecture to entice you to also buy the products without actually telling you about the nutritional value and how bad it's for your health. Here, this is an image of a restaurant in Tallinn. Guess what it sells? Breakfast, yeah? A fried egg on a pan. And then in Kobe, in Japan here, a very well-known architect has designed this fish-shaped restaurant to sell sushi. Guess what? So, that's Frank Gehry, of course. I'm sure all of you know. Or in Seoul, in Korea, the Ministry of Fishery has spent a lot of money mounting this whole exhibition in City Square with all sorts of different installations, cladded with all sorts of fish, dry fish and wet fish. And you can imagine the pong smell in the square in the summer. I actually think that, the best advert, the best person to talk to are your greengrocers, your butchers, your bakers. And this chap here could tell you everything about those ladies' fingers in front of him. I mean, these ladies' fingers, I tell you, they are about 3 times the length of the ones that you can get in Tesco's or your corner shop. And he could tell you how his grandmother would cook it, or his great-great-great-great-grandmother, who has already died a long time ago, would cook it too. And he would then tell you who planted it, where the region it came from, and so forth. I have been bad-mouthing the food industry. This is another legacy of food industry. But here, this building here would not exist if not for the philanthropy of the food industry, and in this case, the company called Tate & Lyle. Tate & Lyle produces most of the sugar that we consume in England. And this is obviously Tate Modern, and this and other buildings around England, these are what I call cultural palaces. Many of them would not have existed without the generosity of these companies. Other companies like Heinz, as in Heinz Soup and Baked Beans, contribute to our urban fabric. The Roundtree Foundation contribute to our social housing as well. So Roundtree would produce all the confection, the sweets, and the gummy bears that you eat. They make them. Who has not watched The Great Bake Off? Everybody here watches The Great Bake Off. That's pretty good. You haven't? You're hardcore. So you resisted it. I love cooking programs. I love reading cooking books. And I love watching The Great Bake Off. And I love reading Nigel Slater. He says, this is the experience in a square, in Hanover Square in London. He says, other people's lunches are always more interesting than one's own. If we were in another country, Italy or Sweden, we might even strike up a conversation. But we are in England. All we get is a little peep. And I think, parks and squares in our city, they're not just a place where you could have a clandestine relationship with somebody's dried up sandwich. This is the High Line in New York. I'm sure many of you would have seen it or been there. This, amongst other parks, royal parks in London and other parks around the world, they are habitat for bees, for production of concrete honey. Concrete honey are generally much higher quality because compared to the ones produced in the countryside, because they're less pesticide sprayed, and they could also pollinate amongst a greater variety of plants and flowers, unlike the monoculture that you get in the countryside. This is bee farming on the rooftop of the Paris Opera House. This is a different rooftop, I guess. Markets. This is Smithfield Market. As we all know, it's one of the key meat distribution center for London. It provides a lot of employment, directly and indirectly. And for anybody who has not been to Smithfield Market, anybody who hasn't been to Smithfield Market at 3 o'clock in the morning, hands up. Everybody has been. Fantastic. Okay, I would suggest that all of you go there very early in the morning with your camera and feeling very hungry. You could go clubbing first, right? And then turn up absolutely rat-ass at Smithfield Market at 3 o'clock in the morning, and you really could actually visit the market. And then after that, about 4:30, you could go to the Greasy Spoon next door and have a wonderful toasted bacon sandwich. And if you're vegetarian, have an egg one. And when you're there, you could actually talk to these people. This chap here, he looks a bit grumpy, but actually he was quite friendly that morning. He was telling me tales that, he said, for our market, we used to have fresh cattle coming in. The cows, for every 100 miles the cow walks, it would shed 20 pounds. And the farmers would get very upset. He could tell you all sorts of tales. I love markets because markets are the palaces for, our food. And this is one of the very beautiful one in Barcelona by the late, great Enrique Morales, where he actually retrofitted this roof over an existing market. Another one here in Rouen in France, you could see that the roof has this incredible desire to reach out to the sun, to almost shake hands with the sun and say thank you for giving us all this sunshine so that we can have wonderful fruits and vegetables. or this even. So the thing is that, this is in Cape Town. This is not as expensive as the two previous buildings, I'm absolutely certain. This is much more low-key, but it has great theater here. It has, it's a beautiful piece of construction, I would say. And unfortunately, in this country, what we get is that we get these fucking horrible design and built buildings, markets. And I would rather not see them. I really rather just have a table there and people just start trading and selling food and so forth, rather than these terrible design built buildings that we have. I think one of the key problems that we have, not just in London, New York, or these successful cities, but also in third world cities, developing countries, cities in developing countries, is food waste. We waste a great amount of food. We waste about 30% of food. 30% of the food produced are never consumed. And yet, we get statistics telling us about 40% of the world's population go hungry at one time or another. And that doesn't quite work out, does it? I mean, why do we waste 30% of food when 40% of people go hungry? This is not Photoshop. This is real. This is in Hebron. And this group of people, if they couldn't find food through this scavenging exercise, they would not have lunch or dinner. This is how sad it has become. And similarly here in Nairobi, that pile of stuff that you see out there, which looks like paper mache, they're actually bags of rubbish thrown away in this sort of illegally by international hotels and so forth. And later on, after this image was taken, people will just flock there. It will be covered with people scavenging for a meal. We have really interesting relationship with, the energy, the idea of energy in our food industry. This is a piece of architecture in Isfahan, in Iran. Anybody from Iran here? You've been there? Okay, so you can tell me probably how beautiful it is inside. I really want to stick my head inside these sort of building. This is a pigeon tower, and they are constructed, pieces of architecture that are constructed purely and for one reason, to collect pigeon droppings, to you and me pigeon shit. Yeah? And they use the collected pigeon poo for, it's true, pigeon droppings to fertilize their fields, their agriculture. And according to myth and stories, the melons especially in this region are the sweetest in the world because they use pigeon droppings to fertilize it. And I find it extraordinary that they would go to this great lengths to have these incredible pieces of architecture just for pigeons, nothing else, to collect pigeon droppings. And yet we have very expensive buildings that look like nothing in this country, those design-built ones. Sorry, I should be banging on about the design-built buildings. This is a scene from in Egypt on the pavement. The sun is the best friend there. The sun is used to rise the bread. You throw in a couple of flies and then a few cigarette butts. You would get the best bread in the world if you don't get diarrhea first. I didn't feel so well when I was there. I shouldn't be telling you all this information. This is dinner time in Mumbai, and dinner time in Mumbai consists of fairly healthy meals. You look at it, there's nothing really wrong with it. There are cooking meals there. But what is really dangerous in terms of the energy they use, it will actually affect their lungs. Biomass, they're cooking with biomass. Biomass is one of the biggest cause of lung cancer in many developing countries. I was fortunate enough to be part of a team that worked on a Lancet commission called Shaping Cities for Health a few years ago. And one of the recommendations we made was that it was imperative for governments to work with a wide pool of urban stakeholders. That includes sort of urban gardeners to informal food sector vendors. This is an informal, what I call informal food sector vendor. And this is his kitchen. His kitchen is on top of a car bonnet. And I'm not lying here. He works there every day. He actually would do a very good business. He would actually supply food for migrant workers, factory workers, laborers who could not afford either a kitchen or actually, who couldn't afford expensive meals. So the things that he actually provides a very important service. So from a makeshift kitchen to the smallest kitchen restaurant in the world. This is next to Tsukiji Market in Tokyo. This restaurant measures less than 5 meters across and less than a meter deep. These two guys here, they collectively age about 200. And they sell soba noodles and tempura, probably one of the most delicious in the world. If you ever go to Tokyo, you must visit them. They're only open between the hours of 3 o'clock in the morning to about 3:30 because that's when the fish traders and the fishermen turn up at Tsukiji Market. And I had many, many bowls of soba noodles there. I love soba noodles, but I'm a bit put off by it now because they wouldn't let me take photos. They actually say no photo in 2 places, no photo twice. So the things that, I have to make friends with them in order to get this image. From the smallest restaurant in the world to probably the largest restaurant in the world, this is in Venice, real Venice. This is not in Las Vegas any longer. This is, you could see this restaurant miles and miles away because of the kind of flatness of the lagoon in Venice itself. When I first saw this project, I just thought, my God, this sounds a bit crazy. It sounds like one of those stupid projects we do at the Bartlett. And it actually, this net goes up and down, and this shack only takes 8 people for any one time. So the things that, you might be sitting with strangers, but there are only 8 of you there. And he would just go up and down with this net a few times, and then whatever comes out of it, that's your meal. There's your lunch or dinner. So it could be a bit iffy. I wouldn't, but it's great pieces of theater. It's low tech, but incredibly effective. And it actually almost choreographs this horizon of the lagoon. This is Mr. Farmer here, and he is also one of the informal food sector members. He would take his flock of ducks across a highway. This is in Guangzhou. The highway has about 8 lanes across on one side. So you can imagine there'll be 16 lanes on both sides. So it makes the M25 look like an alleyway. And it is quite a piece of theater in itself when these flocks of birds just move across from one side of the highway to another side for feeding, because they have to take the birds from one lake to another lake. Or sometimes other farmers would take cows or goats across. This is the reason why we are not allowed to keep birds in our city, in most Western cities. In England, in America, in Australia, we are very, very strict about keeping birds. They get sick and then they get transmitted to humans. I really don't want to go away being the person you remember as being the prophet of doom here. I'm going to tell you now that by 2050, the world's population is going to be about 9 billion. That's quite a big sum. And 2/3 of that figure will actually live in cities. And our cities, I can guarantee you that we are not ready to accommodate, to provide food, water, and sanitation for that number. However, there's hope in some cases where, this is in Belo Horizonte in Brazil. This is a top-down initiative where the government initiated this scheme where every Brazilian citizen will be fed. They're entitled to a nutritious meal a day under Brazilian law 6352. The reason why I feel very positive about this is because in this country, anything which is top-down, we all go, oh, not again. Oh, that's not very good. This was great. This is the Brazilian government realized that to actually install these centers, food centers in a few of them in each city, have actually successfully reduced the national health bill. So for them, it's a very simple idea. It's cheaper to keep the citizens healthy than to cure them later on. Sometimes law doesn't work so well. These are what you and I know as bluefin tuna. We might or might not have them in our sushi and sashimi. They are going to be extinct This is because America and Japan refused to sign this agreement to stop the fishing of these poor creatures. I've always liked this book. I mean, Carolyn wrote this because she once lived next to a sarsen vinegar factory. You know sarsen's vinegar, don't you? If you have ever had fish and chips, you put vinegar on your fish or chips, that will be most likely will be from sarsen's factory. And she said, you didn't even need to put vinegar on your chips. The air did it for you. You could always find your way home in the dark. I love this idea that this piece of architecture, this intangible, ephemeral piece of architecture could lead you back home on a Friday night after you're completely rat ass and pissed. And you know, it's almost like the intangible yellow brick road. So I just love the idea of intangible architecture. If you are a man and you live in Mumbai or Karachi, this would probably be a very familiar scene because your wife would actually be preparing your lunch at about 11 o'clock in the suburb, or your mother-in-law, your mother, and then the Dabawala carrier will come to your door, your house in the suburb, and ring the bell, and then your food will be put into one of those tiffin boxes, and then taken to a main station in Indian City, and then before lunchtime, it will be delivered on your desk. Joking aside, this is an incredible industry. I would encourage anybody when you visit an Indian city to really go to a big railway station at around just before lunchtime, and you will see hundreds, if not thousands, of the tiffin box carrier would be there carrying these enormous structures with food inside it and to deliver. And apparently they never get it mixed up. Isn't that amazing? And it's not just one person doing it, but hundreds and thousands of them. Food transportation, sometimes, as we would observe from time to time, you see scenes like that, which are not very ethical. These are pigs crammed into a truck. The more poetic way, I guess, of delivering food will be this in Bangkok, you know, on these beautiful boats where food are traded, sold, and cooked. And this is in Beijing. This is, I would think, the largest food distribution center ever. The size of it probably would be half of Camden Borough, I would say. It itself, in itself, is almost like a city. Food from all around the world would turn up at this location and then distributed to different destinations around China. It also takes local food produce, too. So you can imagine the size of it. This is in Cape Town. Do you remember Cork earlier on in my talk? I showed you the legacy of the butter industry. Here, this is the legacy of the fruits industry in Cape Town in South Africa, where fruits are introduced to this part of the world by the East India Dock Company. And hence, you know, the prosperity that you see there now is very much because of that incredible idea. This is a building I prepared earlier. And you believe me? Okay. Stuart, this is the building I built earlier. No, this is not the building. I like to say this because, you know, in cooking programs, they always say this. This is the cake I prepared earlier in all these cooking programs. So I don't have a cooking program, but I do architectural lectures, so I like to say this. Anyway, thanks for indulging me. This is the Palace of Westminster. For those who have not had a guided tour inside the building, please go and visit. It's quite incredible. It's one of the most beautiful buildings in England. This is the Food Parliament. This I can say I prepared it 3.5 years ago, so not earlier on. The Food Parliament is a fictional supreme food legislative body for London. It sits over the existing city. And it's about 3.15 kilometers square. As a secondary infrastructure, the Food Parliament functions as a holistic ecology and have a dialogue with the city below it. So from the research that we did much earlier on, and we actually took that information, which was a lot of it. I mean, what I've shown is only a fraction of that early research, and try to synthesize it within a framework and a piece of narrative. And we chose the Parliament to hold all those ideas, to invest in how those spatial urban architectural ideas could be reintroduced into a polemic, speculative project. So the things that, and it was really difficult because, we were quite greedy about the information that we want to introduce and so forth. But what we did was that we actually used this as a vehicle to test many of the ideas and information we found. The architecture itself was very much influenced by this image here. This is a painting by Charles Cockerell. It's a tribute to Sir Christopher Wren. As you can see in the foreground, there are all the Wren buildings at the feet of the bigger one, St. Paul's Cathedral. The project was also very much inspired by the idea of this microclimate bubble of Bucky Fuller, or the 100 characters or so of John Haydock in Victims. I guess the biggest influence to the project and to many, many of my projects would be Mr. Heath Robinson. He's my architectural mentor and guide, I would say. He wasn't an architect, but for those who know his cartoon strips would understand what I'm saying. He's incredibly inventive. I mean, just look at this section, for example. This is a group of people having a party, and this is a person having a very sound sleep. But if you look at the section, he made the section of the floor made of pillows and mattress, sponge around the shoes, and everybody tethered to one sound source, music. And hence, preventing the person below them from waking up. The Food Parliament was also influenced by the way that we have always used narrative to structure our architectural and urban programs. This was a book produced some years ago now, 3-4 years ago. And it was also, we were also investigating not just narrative, but also symbolism and metaphors in architecture, which has been brought into the Food Parliament too. There are 3 pledges within the Food Parliament. The first one is to promote the city as the world's leading international center of excellence for food security. The second is to facilitate local communities in cultivation, processing, and distribution of food. I guess the third one is the most important one. It's to disseminate the new notion of wealth. The new notion of wealth is not what you have in your purse, your pocket, or your bag. It's food security, good health, green space, and fresh air. The Food Parliament is a transformational tool to reveal London's potential response to the omnipresent energy crisis and contributes to the discourse around food poetics and the urban utopia. I would like to encourage you to read all the following, what I say and the images, as metaphors and as a provocation, rather than will it be built tomorrow? Although, having said that, I think some of it could be built, 1 or 2 items or characters could be built tomorrow. The functionaries of the UK's supreme legislative body, so for example, the MP, is not a human person in our scheme of things. It's been turned into an architectonic analog. So they are transfigured into tectonic analogs responsible for tabling and implementing the new Acts of Parliament. So these are the following images that, almost like a storyboard, that will take you through a guided tour of the Food Parliament. So you can have the guided tour of the Food Parliament first, then you can go to the Rail Parliament tomorrow morning. Just to clue you in, this is the Food Parliament, that's the gherkin, that's Westminster Hall plate, sitting above existing London. The gherkin, Westminster Hall plate with these pyramidal structure. Ministry of Defense. That's the Ministry of Defense. Here at the Ministry of Defense is a hybrid between the marigold and the goose. The goose, on many farms, what you will get is that instead of a guard dog, you probably will get a goose to look after. The goose are they are really fierce birds. But what is more interesting is this: a piece of landscape, a plant could actually keep and ward other unwanted insects away. This is an image of urban farming in Havana, and because urban farming, you could not spray. There's a law against spraying chemicals, so they actually have this marigold to prevent all the insects and keep them away because it has this incredible scent. So what we have done here is to hybridize the two things. That is this tall structure that has these sort of the same scent as the marigold. And it would be the first line of defense to protect the food city. And they spray when they send the intruders coming through. And because we don't like killing things, we think that it would just make them go to sleep forever. That's not killing, is it? No. And this is the Westminster Hall plate that sits above the existing building. Remember, we're not demolishing existing London. You have existing London, and you have this piece of infrastructure that hovers over it. And above the flat roofs of all the existing buildings, you get what we call the blue carpet. The blue carpet is the urban fish farm. And what we want to do is to provoke and to entice this very beautiful romantic condition of fishing the old-fashioned way using the cormorant birds in China and also in Japan. So the fish plates, and then on top of which this will sit on top, the Westminster Hall plate. And the plate itself are also punctured, just like those frozen lakes in the fjords in Norway, where it's winter and the lake freezes up, and people just cut a hole in the lake itself and fish. So you can fish from above. I just want to introduce you to more characters. This one here, these are the red briefcase, just remember that. And this is the table of the house, the urban banqueting hall. Or you can use the birds as suggested. This is the House of Commons. What you get is that you get the various parties sitting opposite each other. And this chap here, and formerly it was a woman, this is Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker keeps order in the House. And if you are not familiar with the procedures of the House, Mr. Speaker, would be the person who says when there's too much argument and quarrel between the parties, he will say, order, order. He will keep the silence and order within the House itself. So for our Mr. Speaker, we wanted to be, a structure that has presence, that has this outreach, that has a command over the city. So we were very much inspired by this huge agricultural sprinkler, which has this sort of, in fields, although they're vast, you can see this machine sort of taking control over these large fields. Mr. Speaker is equally as, just like me, the author, we are a bit OCD and a bit neurotic. So we like cleaning. So Mr. Speaker cleans the Parliament. And this is Mr. Speaker here. So when there are any spills within the plate of Parliament, he would start, or she, would start spraying water to clean up Parliament. Remember, this was a project done during the time when we have a slight scandal in Parliament where there was an abuse of MP expenses and so forth. So the whole idea was that this would clean up and make Parliament transparent, metaphorically. You would be looking at many of these rather strangely constructed drawings, these rather flat-on drawings, instead of plan sections or elevations or even axonometrics. Most of these drawings are constructed purely for the purpose of choreographing or presenting a spatial relationship between the different characters and trying to tell a story alongside it. For example, this image here, this is the food Parliament sitting above the existing city of London. But Mr. Speaker is larger than life, looming over the city. And these antennae, these sprays are dropped down to almost say that, you know, to introduce the power of Mr. Speaker, how it controls and oversees peace and transparency of the whole city. That's Mr. Speaker here hovering over the Thames, which is the Lord Mayor. And this is Big Ben. So I'm introducing you to other characters that are coming up in a minute. So back to Mr. Speaker, washing and cleaning Parliament. These pyramidal structures are for food cultivation on top of what we call Westminster Plate. Westminster Hall Plate. This is a painting depicting the coronation banquet of George IV in 1821. Westminster Hall was a space for consumption. In our case, we want it to be something different. Here, this is another depiction of that coronation banquet. In our case, these cathedral-esque spaces are for food cultivation. So you, inside the pyramidal spaces, you actually cultivate food. And this character here, on top of it, that's Victoria Towers with these antennae. And this form were very much inspired by these sort of heaps of spices in markets in North Africa. So, Westminster Hall floats over existing London. So this brings back the reference of Bucky Fuller's Dome over Manhattan. Here, it creates a microclimate that you can choreograph rain, shine, heat, temperature, and humidity and ventilation. That's Westminster Hall Plate, the urban banqueting hall, St. Paul's Cathedral popping through. Any of you are a nerd like myself, I always carry a camera with me. So if you're standing on the street below, you can take a picture of the bottom of that plate. Sprinkling of moisture in one of the pyramidal structures. Worm's eye view into the pyramidal structure. Worm's eye view are not very popular types of drawings now, are they? I remember I used to love those drawings done by James Sterling in the old days, which are absolutely fantastic. Probably I'm telling too much. I'm giving away my age, isn't it? And when the vegetables are in full bloom, grown, harvested, sectioned through. And we also went to great lengths to calculate that we have, because we have different sizes, we look into how much food is produced and, you know, how many households we will feed and how many boroughs will get how many. So this whole plate, this whole food parliament is not just for one borough, it's for all the different boroughs within London itself. The MP. The MP is a tall totem. It has a toupee, what I call toupee on it. You know, some MPs have terrible haircuts. And the toupee is the connector to the pyramids structure. They either deliver or acquire food to bring down to the lower levels. That's a toupee, for those who doesn't know what toupees are. And the toupee will stick through the pyramid here. The community that worked really hard will sit and discuss and observe their hard work. Victoria Towers. Victoria Towers, as I said, is this piece here, up here. It harvests moisture from the air. The idea came from these fog catchers in northern Africa and other deserts. Why is harvesting water important? I'm not sure how much water this will harvest, but I want it to serve as a reminder, the importance of water, portable water. Water like this will be very, very expensive in the future. probably more so than food itself. Because all our lakes and rivers and canals are polluted by industry, or most of them are, and even reservoirs. So the things that, this serves as a reminder of the importance of drinkable water. Just to contextualize, that's the gherkin there, Mr. Speaker hovering nervously above. Harvesting time, where food parcels will be brought down to the lower floors, to existing London city. Doesn't that look like Christmas? That's going to be my Christmas card to all my friends. And Stuart is going to get 2. And food will be distributed among those who work very hard. And they could then march towards the urban banqueting square, the table of the house, to share food with others. This is the table of the house. Isn't it funny? This is not a Photoshop, it's real. I saw this on, I think it's the 19th or something last month in the Independent. Certain boroughs in London are thinking of using food and street food parties, these, as a tool for social cohesion. And they're willing to cough up £900 per citizen. There's a lot of money. I'm sure they're having caviar. So that's a long table. That's one piece that keeps winding itself through and through. So this is the long table that winds itself through. Oh, before I forget, on these leaf pattern, there are the solar panels on the Westminster Hall. Food waste will go down to the River Thames, the Lord Mayor. The Lord Mayor will sort it out. The red briefcase. The red briefcase hangs underneath Westminster Hall, and it would expand when there's more food storage. So different communities, different boroughs, depending on how much food they produce, these will expand or contract. That's the red briefcase. Mr. Osborne in front of 11 Downing Street. In our case, it's a red briefcase, but it also stores not the budget for the country, but the food budget. And the idea came from these structures that you'll find in Spain or Portugal. They are for grain and food storage. You could tell that they have very slender legs. That's to prevent animals from feasting upon their harvest. And as I said, it hangs down and it would contract and expand depending on availability of food harvested that season. And you need a cat in the city, and the cat will keep the rats away when you have lots of food. And each of these will be located above a religious building. It doesn't matter if it's a church or synagogue or a mosque or temple. It would actually, they would be associated with one of these religious centers because they are the hub of communities. And here is the beginning of the Department of Health. The Department of Health lines the embankment. They take the shape of these huge urban bakeries. They would be the one who would be baking the metaphoric and notional pie of new wealth, the pie that contains food security, fresh air, good health, and green spaces. And basically that's the key components for healthy urban living. These are the urban bakeries. And as I said, it will line the embankment, and any excess heat will then be piped into the urban squares. So the urban squares are not made of concrete or steel or anything hard like that. it will be made of these inflated hot smells of baking. Could you imagine? Isn't it wonderful? I mean, I love the smell of baking. So even though they might be building baking metaphoric pies, I still think it will be very, very comforting. So that's me sleeping with my cat. The bakery, the Department of Health, have a very, very important relationship with the MPs. The MPs they might bake it and make it, but the MPs actually distribute it. So the inner lining of the MPs' coats will be lined with pies to be taken out to the different constituencies. So the pies are being lined now in the inner lining of the coat. And if you can't reach it to stack the pies, you can have cherry pickers to line the pies. The MPs marching out from Food Parliament towards the different constituencies to disseminate this notion of new wealth. So it's better than them doing other things. So the deer, this is the introduction of Ministry of Transport. There are these deers. There are no more cars, just deers in the city. And the deer sometimes would pull the MP along. The royal parks and the ring road will become the habitat for the deer. That will be the Ministry of Transport. And then we'll travel. It's another center thing, isn't it? We'll be traveling on sledge. And we can all dress up in red and grow a beard. The Ministry of Transport. The idea comes also from the image of deer hunting in Denmark, and also from Richmond Park, where you have lots of deer. Apart from it being a great source of transportation, means of transportation, it's also much healthier. Venison is much healthier meat than cow or pork itself. And when the MPs reach its destination, it will start to, from a tall structure, it will start to squat down. The idea of the MP is a sort of gathering machine, I guess. It would gather communities who are interested in food, like this here. This is real, this is not Photoshop. This is the Sydney Harbour Bridge. And every year they will host the big breakfast. And the entire bridge will be cladded with astroturf. And all the NGOs, health departments, restaurateurs, chefs, urban food growers, and everybody will turn out. And people who just enjoy food will turn up to discuss and discourse about food security, food poetics, and just sheer enjoyment of good quality nutritional food. The structure itself here is very much inspired by these pigeon towers again. They collect pigeon poo and then distribute it to the different constituency for urban, instead of using chemical fertilizer, they would use these pigeon droppings to fertilize. So the MP will distribute energy as well as the notion of new wealth. The bottom of the MP has these stacked up chairs. So you can actually go and grab these chairs and start to form this forum. And this is when the MP starts to lower itself and form a canopy for the forum. And they could start spouting whatever it is. And not necessarily him spouting it, but the things that, the idea of a member of parliament disseminating the notion of new wealth. And because the tent is lower down, the coat is lower down, you can almost reach out, like these chaps here, and pluck the metaphoric pie. The MPs in context to Westminster, and you could sort of see the glimmer of some of this taller structure of Westminster Hall plate behind. And of course, the toupee. Westminster Hall plate, Big Ben, and 10 Downing Street. 10 Downing Street is a bridge that links North and South London. This is 10 Downing Street with Mr. Cameron there. 10 Downing Street has 23 different very important components of a roof structure. That because he has 23 different cabinet members. And like his cabinet members, the roof structure flap a lot and spout hot air, literally, just like the cabinet members. The Lord Mayor, the River Thames. The River Thames, they are not made of H2O pixels. They are actually pixels of anaerobic digesters, where organic food waste will come into this piece of infrastructure, and methane gas, biogas will be created. And then, depending on how much is produced, it will be indicated by this almost like hot air balloon type structure. What I want to remember when we're talking about the markets, we are very, very interested in creating architecture that celebrates. Just like these gasometers down in King's Cross, that once upon a time celebrates the transparency of energy we have in the city. So here we want it to also capture the romance of these sort of industrial silos and buildings. And so over time, the Lord Mayor will start to bulge in different bits, depending on how much methane gas is produced. Just like that. So, just to recap, the Lord Mayor, Tower Bridge, Tower Hill, the Gherkin, Westminster Hall, Mr. Speaker, these diagrams look at the relationship between the Lord Mayor and how the energy that has been made would be distributed back to the households. Big Ben. I'm sure you were kind of curious and say, why did CJ keep mentioning Big Ben as this horizontal ring? Big Ben surely must be a tower. I'm not interested to be told the time by numerical values or by technology. What I really would like is to have a much more poetic relationship with time and the notion of time itself. So our Big Ben is a horizontal piece of landscape that goes round the food parliament. I want time to be told through color, texture, smell, just like here, springtime in Japan, and autumn through these wonderful golden leaves in Canada. So this horizontal landscape tells time in this city. And you're lucky enough, you go into the London Eye and you can see the pixelation of the Lord Mayor and the food parliament. These are the last few images. We made 2 models for this project here. Just to clue you in, these slats of black card, they are the profile of existing London, so the existing city. The printed matter, the pieces, these would be the red briefcase, the Department of Health, the beginning of Big Ben, the MPs, and the flaps of the 23 cabinet members. So, this is Big Ben and Mr. Speaker. So this is the layer, the relationship between some of these characters, the tectonic characters, with London. The upper plate, you couldn't really see that well, but these are the pyramids. The model itself is very bling-bling. It looks like a kind of Swarovski sort of beaded model. And then the black bits here would be the Victoria Towers that catches moisture from the air. Okay, thank you very much. Should I take a few questions? I'm very happy to take a few questions, but After questions, I will be sitting in that corner there. If anybody wants to come and talk to me or look at the books over there, please come and buy a copy of the book, and I'm very happy to sign it for you. But first, we'll take some questions. Any questions? No? Okay.
I'd just like to ask you a question about why you're having so much fun.
Why I'm having so much fun?
Yeah, the issue is you seem to have all these narrative-infused sort of fantasies in the work, and I'm just wondering how do you persuade the Chinese government to employ you to design anything when you're having such fun?
Stuart, I haven't presented the food parliament to the Chinese government, otherwise I'll get sacked. That's absolutely for sure. I think this was the opposite, the antithesis of the projects that we have done for the Chinese government. This is the complete reverse, where those projects are incredibly serious. They have the... Do you want to sit down for 2 seconds? Whereas this one is the direct opposite. So when we actually made this project and started the research, we were very keen to really explore food's relationship and its urban consequences from the other side, rather than from a brief which is this thick, told to us what to do and what to have by the various governments. I mean, don't get me wrong, we have had great opportunities given to us, never by anybody but by the Chinese and the Korean government, so I'm eternally grateful to them. But sometimes the brief doesn't allow a kind of polemic thinking or speculation that goes beyond fulfilling a brief. I'm sure most of you would know, if you do a competition or you get a commission, the client tells you what they want, and it's very difficult to introduce other more speculative aspects of it into play. So I don't have fun. Why do you think I have fun?
You seem to have lots of fun. Unless you have an army having the fun for you.
I think we have an army of people having fun. That's more important. Anyway, any other questions? No? Great.
Okay.
Okay, thank you very much.